Hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining. I think some will be watching live and some listening back later. So yeah, good to see some of you here. For those I haven't met before, I'm Sarah McClellan. I'm a work psychologist and the author and founder of Make It Human. I think I can see some familiar faces, so I know many of you will have met me before. Um, Thank you for joining. This is a new series, a new session called Coffee and Culture. So I hope you've got a cup of coffee. I've got one in hand. The idea behind this is that it's a quite short, sharp, focused session, more on sharing some tools, ideas, and concepts on how we can shape thriving workplace cultures. So I'm hoping that you'll leave today with some ideas that you can instantly pick up and try with your teams and organizations. So the session is every fortnight. It will be this time on a Thursday morning, so 9:30 UK time. And the format will be I'll talk for about 10 to 15 minutes on a key topic. And then I'll open up and see if there are questions or if there are points that people want to discuss. So feel free to add some things to the chat, or if you want to save it and ask it, and you can discuss it. We can discuss it as a group later on, and we'll see whether there is much discussion points to go through. I suspect we'll be done within half an hour. So yeah, just time to have a cup of coffee and talk about culture. The topic today is all about how can we simplify culture. So I've got some ideas, some thoughts, and a tool to share that you can use in your own teams and organizations. Also, just to say, I'm recording this because the idea is that I'll build up a catalogue of sessions like this where you can dive in and get support and some ideas as and when you need it. So let's start with a quick reflection on what culture is. And I think many people find it hard and feel that they need to simplify culture because it feels like this. It's swirling around us, it's dynamic, it doesn't stay still. Someone new joins and things all get shook up a little bit, or something in the environment changes, and that can impact our culture instantly. It's also very complex. So lots of different things interact and shape it, and people see it in different ways. So it isn't always that you'll get a consistent view on what culture is. It is also intangible. A lot of it is the feelings that we create. How does an environment make us feel? How does this room, this group of people make us feel? What does that make us do from an action, from a decision, from a thinking point of view? So a lot of it is kind of going on around us, and it is hard to pinpoint. But the big thing, and I'm sure the reason why a lot of you here is because culture is incredibly powerful. So whether it's helping us grow or blocking us from growing, it's really powerful. And it really is, I think, the number one thing that determines success for individuals and organizations. So being able to simplify it and shape it in a positive way is incredibly valuable. And I'm sure you can relate to this. This is, I think, how culture feels. It's this swirling thing around us. People talk about it all the time. You'll hear people saying, oh, that's just how things are done here. Or you'll look around and you'll see, oh, people aren't asking questions in this session, but they are asking questions in other sessions, or with this leader, or with that group of people. And people comment on it all the time. So you can quite quickly get a sense of how it feels here. How are things done? And of course, we see a lot of reference to culture being about how we feel about work on a Monday morning or a Sunday night. There's lots of visuals being shared across social media relating to feelings like that. So it swirls around us, but it shapes so much. And I mentioned it earlier, in that culture really does shape what we believe, what we think, what we feel, and what we do. And this, I think, is a really important kind of chain reaction for us to get our heads around and try and understand, and then proactively shape wherever we can. And the definition that we use at Make It Human of culture is here. So we see it as the unconscious shaping of beliefs, thoughts, feelings, and actions by the environment around us, the ways of working, behaviors that we tolerate and reward, and the habits that we adopt. And we'll dive into that very shortly, and I'll share a tool with you for helping you to really kind of unpick and understand your culture in that way. But the key thing is this chain reaction. It's the how it shapes what we believe, what we think, and then critically, how we feel then really shapes what we do. And I'm sure that that's something you can all relate to, how you feel really shaping whether you think, oh, this is a place where I can pause and take lunch, or I'm feeling really valued and inspired here, therefore I'm going to work a bit harder, or perhaps I'm not because I'm not feeling that way. And of course it can fluctuate, it will change from day to day a bit, but what we're looking for is how do we create that longer term feelings of positivity, of engagement, of being valued, of being included, and there are some recipes we can use there. But the big challenge is that even though most leaders, managers today would say, I want to improve my culture. And in fact, most surveys, when they talk about what leaders are prioritizing, culture will be in the top one or two things. It doesn't often translate into action and actual improvement because we don't know how or where to start. So we get a lot of people scratching their heads thinking this is a problem, but they tend to turn a blind eye or hope it will go away, hope it will disappear, and things will get better. And of course they tend not to get better, they tend to get worse, and then we end up with negative impact, toxic environments, negatively impacting our people and our business. So getting on the front foot and really breaking it down is very beneficial. So how do we do that? And this is the tool that I want to share with you all today. And thanks to those who are just joining, you're getting to the key part, the juicy part that I think will give you some thoughts to take away and apply in your own organization. So at Make It Human, we think about culture in terms of the culture triangle. So I mentioned it earlier in terms of our definition of what culture is. And what we're trying to do is simplify culture to make it more tangible and break it down into components that then we can understand. We can actually think, tangibly almost pick up and look at and explore. And then that enables us to identify and target actions to help nudge culture in a more positive, sustainable direction. So the culture triangle is in the name, has three parts. And it is breaking down culture into the environment, the behaviors, and the habits that we adopt as individuals. So in your environment, if you're working in a physical building, or even if you're working remotely, like I do a lot of my time, you still quickly pick up a sense of what it's like here. If you're walking physically into an office building or a workplace, then how it's laid out, what it looks like, what people are wearing, the signage on the walls, how people interact with you, what you're asked to do. Is this quite a safety focused organization? Do I need to read some information and sign something that says I will behave and follow certain procedures? Even, things like, are they celebrating successes? Are there kind of trophies or recent wins displayed on the walls around? These sorts of things tell us very quickly, this is what it's like here. This is what's important to us. I remember I was talking to someone recently and they said, I used to work in an organization where they had a separate lift for the executive team. So actually a car park and a lift. So the executives could go around the side of the building, come out of their cars and then straight into their own lift. So they didn't have to interact with anyone else in the organization. And instantly that says something about that culture. So really thinking about what does your environment say? What does it communicate? Because those cues are priming us. So we then walk in, whether it's virtually or in person, thinking, this is how I need to behave here. Everyone is looking very smart. This is quite formal. I'm going to interact in a very formal way, or perhaps the other way around. So the environment and getting a sense of it, and you can do that by walking through your environment, trying to objectively say, what are we saying? What are we communicating? You can do it by talking to individuals, perhaps new joiners or customers or people visiting your organization and getting some feedback. Behaviors is the second part, so the second piece in the culture triangle. And this gets into things around what are we rewarding? So how do people progress? Who gets promoted? Who doesn't? What do we performance manage? And also, really importantly, what are the things that we'll tolerate? And I think that's a really key one to kind of get in and unpick. So if you are turning a blind eye to certain behaviors, perhaps somebody tramples over others a bit, but they deliver great results. Everyone around them will see that. They'll see the poor behaviors. They'll see that they're kind of jumping on others to get what they want, and they'll see that they're being rewarded. And that then sets the tone, sets the expectation for how others behave. So diving in and looking at some of those moments around what are you rewarding, what are you tolerating, what is written in your KPIs, in your performance indicators, what are you talking about in terms of measures of success? That gives a real sense of how people are being told and what they think is important in terms of behaviors. And then finally, habits. And this bit I really like because I think this gets into the real tangible day-to-day habits that we engage in as individuals or as teams or in organizations. So things like how do we communicate? Who communicates? What information is shared and when? What information isn't shared? Meetings. Obviously, meetings are talked about all the time at the minute because that seems to be our universal solution to solving every problem. But what do meetings look like? How are they structured? Do we actually get stuff done? Do we reach decisions? Learning? Do we talk about failures? Do we encourage people to make mistakes and learn from them and share them? Or are people feeling they have to bury those deep and not talk about the things that they've learned, and therefore we're likely to make them again? And things like connection, building connection from a social point of view. Do people feel they can do that? Are they doing that on a regular basis? Are people taking breaks? Are they able to, take time out for holidays? Or is there a tendency to kind of work through and, really burn the midnight oil to get work done because that's the priority? And when you get into habits, you can really think about what are the things that are fueling growth here? What are the things that are blocking growth? And even just putting them on post-it notes or up on a flip chart and saying, sorting them into different piles of what's fueling, what's blocking. Quite quickly, you can get to, let's try something else, or let's stop that habit because it's holding us back. Then with this combination, you're starting to break down that formula. Environment plus behaviors plus habits quickly becomes the way things are done around here. And that really is our culture. So that's the culture triangle. And I hope that that's given you some food for thought over your coffee to help think about how can you consciously shape cultures for growth. So use that to break down what you're seeing in your environment. What messages, what cues is it sending? Are there things that you want to change? Are there things that are misaligned? What behaviors are being rewarded? And really importantly, what behaviors are being tolerated for results? Are there some things that need work and could be refreshed and realigned? And do a habit review session, perhaps with your team or some colleagues, and work out what's fueling growth, what's holding you back. And then you're starting to really tangibly shape the way things are done around here and positively impact this chain of what people are believing, what they think, what they feel, and then ultimately what they do. So that's a very quick overview of how to simplify culture. And we've talked through the culture triangle and hopefully some ideas that you can pick up and use. The next session in 2 weeks' time, on the 10th of April, we'll explore what is a growth culture. So if you haven't already, make sure you add this calendar invite to your diary so that you get a reminder popping up. And feel free to share with others as well. It'll be great to spread the word. Now I'm just going to quickly see if we've got any questions in the chat, or if anyone wants to ask anything now, then feel free to do so. I can see, I don't think we have much in the chat. Just hello, good morning, everybody from Jeanette with a cup of coffee. Fabulous. But yeah, if anybody has anything they want to share or questions or reflections, then feel free to ask.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello, Ed.
I've got a question. Which companies are you seeing do this particularly well at the moment, and which are the companies that you think could be doing this better?
Yeah, great question. I think, well, I don't know whether it's companies, but I think there are leaders who are embracing this, who are trying to get on the front foot and say, actually, I don't see culture as something that just has to happen to us. They're trying to lift their heads and say, how can we proactively shape it? And particularly around hybrid work. So I think you'll see a lot of organizations, some of the kind of smaller ones, some in the tech space, who are actually saying, let's really think about the habits that we've got, the ways of working that we're developing, and are they fueling growth? So companies like Atlassian are really interesting to follow because they're doing some really kind of creative stuff around how to make hybrid work in particular really work, and Dropbox as well. I've seen some good examples there too. But equally, as I said, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be company wide. That's the good thing about this, is it can start with a leader or a manager. So all of you could say, I'm going to positively influence and shape this.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
If anyone else is seeing are you seeing any good examples, Ed, other companies?
No, I think you're right that it can be done in a more isolated way. Certainly where I work at HSBC, we see some differences in the way leaders have been setting a culture there within the organisation. But I think they often look at some of these smaller companies and for ideas and ways of working. So it's interesting just to hear a couple of other examples.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think microculture, you can influence and shape a microculture, even in big organization like HSBC. Within it, there will be thousands, I imagine, of different microcultures. Yeah, finding the things to try and experiment with. A lot of those tech companies are experimenting and doing it in an open way, saying, look, we don't know necessarily the answers, but we're going to try this and let's work together and explore it. We've got a few other questions here. So John says, are there any common barriers you've encountered to implementing this sort of culture first approach? Yes, yes, John, I think there are, and I'm sure others will see these as well. I think there are quite a few barriers. I mean, some of them are the things that we talked about at the start in the nature of culture, because it's hard to pin down, it's hard to make tangible, which obviously is the idea of this model, to try and make it more tangible to start with. But also, I think the big thing, well, there's two big things, and they're the common challenges in lots of transformations. But one is being able to show the impact in kind of hard financial terms, productivity terms. And a lot of the time, leaders struggle to communicate that, to really kind of build that case, because there is a lot of research out there, and there's a nice book that's just come out that is about well-being and the clear links between building a culture where people can can feel, can have high levels of well-being and the impact on sustained financial performance. But because that can take time to deliver, and really realize you've got to go all in, really, it can be difficult to kind of really bring everybody on board in the first instance. So I think things to combat there. The other big one is time. People will say, I haven't got time. How do I want to improve culture, but it doesn't make its way up to the priority list. And unfortunately, that then makes it become harder to tackle. And it isn't until it's a really big issue that we sit down and go, okay, let's try and work this out. And I think a good antidote to both of those is kind of what Ed was talking about in microcultures and trying small things. So one, there is a lot of data out there that will show you the positive impact of a great culture on all sorts of different metrics. If you need help with that, let me know, because I've got lots of information. I'm really happy to share that. The other thing is picking a team, a small team, might be your own team, there might be an HR team, to start and demonstrate the positive impact that some of these changes can have. And once you start getting momentum, others come with you. So don't be put off by the, yeah, I'd love to do culture, but there's so many other important things, because that's the biggest blocker. Is we need to do culture because it drives everything. We need to start with culture, and then everything else gains momentum. I hope that helps a bit. If anyone has any thoughts, then feel free to share. We've got a few questions now. We've got another one. Jeanette says, we often think about leaders shaping culture, but in a large organization, subcultures are often more powerful, often set by middle managers. How might we overcome this? I think that's a great point. And I totally agree. As we were saying, I think, culture is shaped by all of us. Yes, leaders play a more significant role in shaping it and in reshaping it, but we all have a great opportunity. If you think about the culture triangle, we all engage in certain habits each day. Those habits also make us feel energized or not energized, or drained. They make us feel happy or less happy. So I think, thinking about the things that we as individuals can do to help us feel more energized, to help us feel more connected, can then, roll up and help build a more positive culture. So I think a great way in, Jeanette, is to talk about, as individuals, what are you doing? What's making you feel good? What's not? Where are your frustrations? Try and highlight some of the habits that people could personally adopt. And then if you start rolling that up to a team conversation, how do we spend our time together? When do we meet? What topics do we talk about? These people always talk and these people don't. How can we change that? Then we can get into some quite tactical shifts. And before you know it, you're starting to influence your culture. I don't know. Does that help a bit, Jeanette?
Yes, thanks, Sarah. I think it does. And it's that balance, isn't it? We try to do things as leaders to shape culture, but sometimes we can believe that we've done it. And then it's only when you get, from conversations or from actions of others, you realize that actually we might swallow our own hype and not really appreciate that lower down, nothing has changed. And so that's quite difficult to manage.
Yeah, it's hard. And yeah, culture doesn't stay still, as we talked. It's continuously evolving. We have to keep an eye on it, but thinking about the ways that, I think in many ways the better cultures are built bottom up, from people saying, and engaging in what is going to help me, what's going to help us. And if we can do that kind of grassroots way of shaping behavior, then it's more likely to sustain. But it's a great point. Stephen says, here in the construction industry, we've come a long way with safety culture, but we cannot be complacent and need to continue to develop this culture to ensure the workplaces and sites remain safe and enable everyone to return home safely. Yeah. Yeah, and I think in engineering and construction industries are great examples of where the environment is so important. So you'll get different emphasis, different flavors. I know we've got some people also who are in education settings. Those settings are so important as well. And it's amazing how quickly you can glean something from the room that you walk into. Where should I sit? What's going to happen in this room? Do people ask questions? How do they interact? And so I think those two industries, education and construction or engineering, very quickly you get some cues, and we're used to that. We're used to being primed around what this means, how I should behave in this environment. So yeah, thank you all. That's great. We've got some really great reflections on culture, how we simplify it, how we break it down, and how we make it more tangible. And I think, yeah, to your point earlier, Jeanette, it is culture doesn't stay still, and the good news and the bad news is that culture is never done. So whilst we might think, yeah, big tick, we've made great progress in our culture, unfortunately something can happen and knock us off course. So it's a muscle that we have to keep developing. We have to keep talking about it. So bringing in middle managers, bringing in individuals, sharing what's working, what's not, what we want to try, getting their feedback. And at first it often feels hard. It's tough to open up some of these conversations, but like anything, the more you do it, the more it becomes a habit. So actually developing a habit that is talking about culture is a really good habit to build in your organizations. So thank you very much. I also note Louise has told me that the invite has sent the wrong time to some people. So thank you, Louise. I'll have a look at that and make sure it gets to the right time. But thank you very much for joining. I hope that's been helpful. Hope it's given you some food for thought over your coffee. And yeah, join me next time. So in 2 weeks' time, and we'll get more into what is a growth culture. So what are the conditions that we can create, and how tactically can we do that in our day to day? And please do spread the word. Help others know that there are tools, there's examples being shared in this session. It'd be great to build it. Thank you all. See you soon.